today's video, we're going to take a look at the QN90B Samsung Neo QLED. This is a very good 4K TV that I think a lot of people are going to be happy with. Alright, before we begin, I just want to remind you guys that I will be putting the product link in the description below, and if you guys use this link to buy anything at all off the website, it will help out the channel. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so for the unboxing, it was a pretty straightforward experience, kind of your typical 55-inch TV. Cut the box, lift it up. So we got the stand here, we got the remote here, we got the batteries here. Wait, there's no batteries because it is a solar remote. That's cool. And we also have the power cable. Overall, it is about the same as last year's remote, except for there is a few little differences here. They also did add a Disney Plus button to the remote. Of course, you can't forget the screws. Unless you buy this TV open box at Best Buy, then you might forget the screws. So seriously, if you're buying open box, make sure there is screws in the box. I've had this happen. So what I do when I usually set up a TV is I put the box on a table, and then I put the TV face down on that box, and then I'll slide it to the edge so I can get the stand on nice and easy. Honestly, I feel like this is probably one of the better ways to do it. A lot of people don't like that the stands are the same from year to year. But honestly, this is just a really good stand. So just keep using it, Samsung. We like it. All right, so from there, you're going to plug in the TV. We're going to go through the setup process. It's going to ask you if you want to run an update. Might as well run that update. It's going to give you the latest firmware. Otherwise, if you don't get the update and you try to update over the air afterwards, it might not work. So when I did it on the QN85B, I actually said, no, I don't want the update. But then later, when I tried to get the update, it said no update available. So definitely get the update while you're setting it up. That way you don't have to go through this weird process of having no update. All right, so let's talk about the changes to the home screen and all the settings and everything, and then I'll dive into the settings. I think I'm not going to speak too much on the home screen thing because I did talk about it in the QN85B first impressions video. So if you need to learn more about the home screen, check that out after this. But to sum it up, there is a brand new menu system. When you hit the home key, it's going to be a full screen menu instead of the bottom bar that pops up with all your options. Now to get this bottom bar with all your picture settings and stuff, you have to press the 1, 2, 3 key, which is now shared with the settings button. Alright, so the first thing you want to do once the TV's up and running is of course go into your general settings and then make sure you go to power and saving and unclick all of that stuff because it's going to make your TV a lot dimmer. Turn this stuff off. From there, what I like to do is I like to fire up the YouTube app and find a really cool 4K demo to tweak my picture settings. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So brightness changes the overall light output on the TV, the backlight itself. So you want to make sure that this is set to whatever you feel like is necessary for the picture mode that you're in. This next one, contrast, you're going to want to keep this around 50 on HDR. Typically, you drop this on SDR or else you will be clipping. Next one is sharpness. This is going to be how sharp you want the picture to be. This is pretty much your edge enhancement. You don't want to push this up too much or you will get some really ugly looking picture quality. This is a very sensitive slider. But again, settings, they're all going to be your personal preference. So I can't stress that enough. Alright, the next option is tint. That's pretty self-explanatory. Then you have apply picture settings. You could either select all sources or current input. This is just where you want your picture settings to go. So for picture clarity, I like to use the custom settings so that I can set my judder reduction and my blur reduction. So blur reduction is going to apply motion interpolation to 60 frames per second content. Your judder reduction is going to apply motion interpolation to 30 frames per second content and 24 frames per second content. So this is going to be just how you get better motion out of those sources. Now you can mess around with this. If you crank it up too much, you're going to have soap opera effect. Some people don't like that. Some people do like that. So yeah, play around with it. I think motion is very subjective. Some people like certain things, some people don't. So try that out. LED clear motion is your black frame insertion. This has quite a flicker to it, so this might be something a lot of people are sensitive to. So make sure you try this out, see if it's something you like, because on some games it actually looks pretty good. So noise reduction, this is going to be a personal preference thing for you most likely. If you're somebody who doesn't enjoy film grain, you're going to want to turn this on to auto because it does sort of eliminate that. It also will do a decent job with some of the banding, though it's not what it's intended for. And the downside of it is you can lose some fine details. So this may or may not be something you want to use. The next one, local dimming. If you have this on local dimming low, this is typically what I would roll with for SDR. Now, standard and high, I reserve those for HDR content. Standard is going to tone map your highlights up to 4000 nits, and high is going to allow the TV to kind of disable some of that tone mapping. Not all of it, but some of it. As far as which one looks better, I think it is really content dependent. It really depends on what it is that you're watching. So what I do is I like to keep one of them on filmmaker mode and one of them on movie mode. So yeah, basically just make sure you have two picture modes that has one on standard and then one on high for HDR. And then kind of switch between those two if you want to see which one gives you the best highlights for that certain situation. Because I've had some situations where I like standard better than high, but there's also other situations where high is better than standard. So, it definitely goes back and forth for me. For gaming, I pretty much stick to high local dimming. I think that is giving me the best results most of the time. So yeah, that's what I suggest doing. So contrast enhancer, this is totally up to you whether or not you use it. I think personally it crushes too much details for me to want to use it. There's no doubt that it will make the picture pop a lot more, but you will be kind of killing your image. Because if you're using contrast enhancer, you're pretty much going to get rid of a lot of your shadow detail and a lot of your highlight detail. And if you're watching a movie, you probably don't want that. Color tone is going to be your color temperature. So there's 4 presets to pick from: cool, standard, warm 1, and warm 2. All right, so we got the gamma adjustments here. Now, a bit of a suggestion for this part, and I don't know if this will fly when the firmware updates hit or not, but the ST2084 for HDR, you're probably going to want to lower this down to -3 to give you better picture quality overall. I feel like it was tuned a little bit too high out of the box, and I want to give a big shout out to Keep It Classy Tech for helping me out with this part, because I was trying to figure out why the QN85B was looking way better than the QN90B at the time, especially in game mode. This definitely helped out a lot. Next one is going to be shadow detail. You are going to typically want to leave this as 0 unless you find a situation where you want to darken the shadow detail or brighten the shadow detail. It's really up to you, and I think it is really kind of like source dependent depending on what you're watching. So play around with that if you ever feel like your shadows are just kind of crushing a little bit, or if you feel like you think the shadows are a little bit too lifted, then lower it down. All right, the next one is color space. You're typically going to want to leave this at auto or custom. If you go to native, you're definitely going to get some radioactive kind of greens, so keep that in mind. If you're using native, maybe drop the color a little bit to compensate. But use what you like, honestly. But custom uses auto as its base, so if you're ever wondering why auto and custom are typically the same thing. So if you set your custom to BT2020, then your auto will be BT2020. If you set it to DCI-P3, then your auto will be DCI-P3. Kind of weird, but it's always been like that for Samsung TVs. Alright, so my first impressions on the QN90B, I think overall it's a better TV than the QN90A. The improvements alone to the processing is pretty noticeable right out of the gate, and also the changes to local dimming and how it all just behaves in game mode is impressive as well. So a lot of the weaknesses from the QN90A last year have been resolved. There's still some in place, so it's not the perfect TV, but it's really good, and I think it might be the HDR king this year when it comes to 4K LCD TVs. But we'll see, because Sony X95K could say something about that as well. I'll do a comparison between the QN90B and the QN85B because these TVs are way closer than most people would even imagine. The biggest difference is going to be how bright the highlights can get compared to the QN85B. So this stuck out to me right away. But on the flip side, I felt like the QN85B might have some better color. And I think that's attributed to the ADS panel. And I honestly also think this could be contributed to the ultra wide viewing angle filter that's on these Samsung QN90 series TVs. The biggest issue with that is only really kind of noticed in game mode. Outside of game mode, the color looks fantastic. Even inside of game mode, the color looks fantastic. It's just that the QN85B looks better in game mode for color. But this is just color-wise, of course. You know, highlights and everything else, that's awarded to the QN90B. Black level awarded to the QN90B. So it is definitely a decent comparison, and I think it's a fair one to make. Overall, if you're thinking about getting the QN90B, it's a fantastic TV. Probably my favorite HDR TV that I've seen yet. I'll have a full review on this TV a little bit down the line, so stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing because I will have a ton of TV reviews for you this year, including the QD OLED, so you're really not going to want to miss that. On the topic of the QN85B, if you haven't seen that review yet, go check that out because a lot of that stuff is going to carry over to the QN90B, and I went pretty in depth. So check that out right here after this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.